welcome. Thank you so much. Hopefully, what I wanted to do is give you something to actually take and you could actually try. All the slides in here, except for the first few, are pretty big and pretty colorful, and some even have animations and blinky stuff. So don't get scared that the first ones are, what do you call it? Not as, what I just described. Okay. Yeah, all right. So that's okay. I could just touch it. Most important on this slide is the top left. I had a shallow near-death experience. I had an amazing quantum change experience brought on by a non-dual meditation. I've had other really cool experiences, including I get the vocabulary from coming from IANDS. I had a shared crossing experience, a flyby experience of my grandfather when he passed away. He woke me up in the middle of the night, and the energy just woke me right on up. And you question these things back at that time as things happened to me. I always looked like this happened to me and that happened to me and that happened to me. But now we know we're just connecting more and more and more to oneness, right? And really all there is. And so getting the vocabulary is really helpful. And, so I questioned it because I was young and it was so cool. It was definitely woke me right on up. And I said, well, he always liked my eyes. So if this baby comes out with blue eyes, I'll know that was really him. And what was really funny is my daughter is half Filipino. She came out with one of my eyes and one brown eye, which is so rare. So isn't that crazy? But so that's what's important. It's more and more about the experience and less about getting all these fun credentials. I am a product of an English teacher and a math teacher. I love to learn. I love to synthesize what I learn. I love to share. I love to help people flourish. A lot of times that means getting these professional certifications and working with companies that, people like to see on resumes, et cetera, et cetera. The other super important thing I wanted to point out is actually in the lower right corner, which is havening techniques. Because after I had that quantum change experience, if you don't know what that means, it's like you're one way and then you're completely different. And we hear some of these near-death experience stories where their personality completely changed, something happened, and they're just different person. Sometimes their family is really confused. That didn't happen to me with my shallow near-death experience, as cool as that was. It happened to me through meditation. And I just wanted to know what happened to my brain. So I started learning all kinds of other stuff, and havening techniques played a big part in that. And so if you're interested in some of the things I'm talking about, there are some really affordable courses, 6-hour, 12-hour courses on PESI.com. I'm into all this other kind of stuff. I have on my website lists and recommendations. And so a lot of things I recommend as we walk through today are either free or super low cost to get into. Of course, I love supporting people who are doing the things out there in the world and making money. We all know our margins support our mission. So, but sometimes, money is tighter than others. And so it is nice to know that there are the free and low cost options. And I definitely recommend havening. I took the PESI course, and it's 6 hours long. And then I went on to get certified havening. And why I wanted to mention it here and why I'm so excited to tell you about it is because I had to do these case studies, 30 case studies. And I wasn't even halfway through my case studies, and 2 of my case study volunteers had visits from deceased loved ones during havening. And havening touch, I'll show you it a little bit more later. It takes advantage of what we already know, soothing touch, but it was studied by these doctors who wanted to find out, why do things like EMDR help people heal? Why does EFT tapping help people to heal? Why does acupuncture help people to heal, et cetera? They weren't trying to make something new. They were just curious. One had a PhD in organic chemistry and an MD, and the other one was a doctor as well. And they said it was these delta waves. That's what they found. And so, and then they said, well, how do we get the most delta waves? And they ended up making their own thing. So it wasn't meant to be for spiritual connection, but here it was happening on accident. And if anyone's interested in helping me see that happen on purpose, reach out, because I've been doing it with volunteers to see, can we make this connection happen on purpose? And it's been 87.5% success rate of connecting. So it's super cool. It's cool in its own regard for healing and wellness, but it's cool for possibly connecting. So I'm excited to share that with you. And it does only take just your hands, right? And so it's something that's easy to bring to work. And I bring it into my full-time work and work with people with havening in the sense of decreasing stress. Someone came to me for anger, wanted to work on her anger. And so there is that. And then a lot of the times I'm teaching these best practice service management, project management courses. And what's interesting is, like, even in those courses, there's Barrett Consciousness Leader Model or something like this, Barrett Consciousness Model. There's Servant Leadership, which is a course all about service. Some of them bring up Maslow's self-transcendence a lot. And this is what we're teaching. IDLE used to be IT infrastructure language, and yet we're teaching about connection to purpose. Like, how huge is that? And the Barrett consciousness model, like, how huge is that? So there I am in front of the Air Force in Aviano, Italy, and the slide comes up, not much to look at, talking about co-creating value. And here's the organization co-creating value with the employee. So of course you get a paycheck, but as an employee, you also get connection to, or okay, we'll save that one for last. You get professional development, personal development, and connection to purpose. And I was just so excited. I'm like, isn't this the greatest? It's my favorite slide in the whole PowerPoint. And of course they're looking at me like, and I said, okay, says the tree hugging yogi from California. And they all laugh at me. So we have to meet people where they are. And part of that in the US means that we need to acknowledge, according to the Stress Institute, 83% of the workforce is chronically stressed. And so we come soaring high after a conference like this and be like, hey, I want to infuse some of this into what I'm doing. Let's first get them out of that ever stressed mode. And I put together these stages as not a rigid, there's really a stage 1, there's really a stage 2, but just to say we want to meet people where they're at. Most of them are in ever stress mode. What I work with 100% of the time is I take a trauma-informed approach. Trauma is very prevalent, right? And so in superconscious leadership, I call it a trauma-informed, quantum-informed approach, and which spells tiki, so that's kind of fun. So when we look at the superconscious part of this, oopsie, I went too fast. Okay. And we're hearing this over and over and over again, but as superconscious leaders, we say, okay, we appreciate that theory you have that matter is at the foundation and matter's where it's at and everything comes from that. But we like this theory better. We like this theory that says conscious awareness is the foundation of everything, that our universe exists in conscious awareness, and we are connected with unitive awareness, which you could equate with superconscious. And then within a body, we have access to a subconscious, we have access to pre-conscious, we have access to, I put lowercase c there for conscious awareness. So it gets confusing where you have conscious awareness and then just being awake makes you conscious, right? So how connected are we to that oneness? And so when I was saying before, is I thought of everything as this neat thing happened to me, that happened to me, this happened to me. Oh, I wish that would happen to me. That's not what it really is. It's me connecting where, into the superconscious and beyond, or into getting something from spirits, getting something from my grandfather as he passed through, getting messages from my father who passed away in November in my dreams, and understanding that we're connecting, it's there. And when we think about being spiritual, I'm not opposed to the term higher self, don't get me wrong, but I personally stopped saying higher self because that always sounded like it's somewhere away from me, when it's really the most foundational thing there is, when really we are these spiritual multidimensional giants projected through these biological spacesuits. And in doing so, we tune into the Earthling station, right? We're kind of blocking out a lot of information. And so you've probably heard story after story after story this week and beforehand, or had your own experiences. Like, there was so much more when I'm not in my body, right? And so that's where we come from, and that's why I call it quantum informed. Also, it's more HR friendly if you are bringing it into the workplace. Like today, I'll say spirit, I'll say multi-dimensional spiritual giant. I mean, we could really just go there right now. Shaman Durek once said something to the effect that you are this spiritual giant projected into this teeny tiny thumbelina of a body. And so we have to get that, like, and then we just forget, right? And it's always there, always bright. You could think of that. That's me. I used to have purple hair, so I'm in the walnut. I drew that one day on the iPad. But we're in the body. The body's just worried about, staying alive, doing all the earthling stuff. And when we get really focused on the earthling channel, it kind of blocks out all that spiritual stuff. But our spirit is always 100% bright. So if I updated the Shaman Durek image I made to be that spirit, so there's my beautiful light, always perfect, being projected through the biological spacesuit, and there it's shining through, like I'm connected. And in this version, not so much, right? And we do hear this in life. I'm not saying like because there's scribble, it's bad. Like, we have this weight of the world on our shoulders sometimes. Sometimes we have a heavy heart, knots in our stomach, rocks in our stomach, right? There's this gravity and heaviness to something that's other than that beautiful frequency of love. And it comes from just by the nature of being in form, being in form. And then we have those moments in our life where it's levity, there's a spring in our step, right? Or something blows your mind, like all the mind stuff just gone right out of there. And we have self-transcendent emotions like awe, right? Or I'm walking on cloud 9. So I'm not ever saying it's bad that you have this effect of kind of blocking out that beautiful spirit. So we'll do a quick compassion check. You could just think about this in your seats. And this is for compassion, not condoning any of the actions that I'll tell you about. So you might have heard of Phineas Gage. He was not an angry guy or a mean guy, but then he got this rod through his head and his personality changed. He was very angry and very mean. And do I have compassion for him? Again, not condoning if he was mean. And is that compassion from my heart? Or am I talking myself into having compassion? Or are there parts in there going, well, if I got a rod through my head, I'd still be nice. I know I'd still be nice. Oh, no, come on, just think about it. Or some intellectual part of us going, well, I bet it's this part of the temporal lobe and that controls right? Or is it just I have that kindness and compassion I could extend? This story comes from when I was getting certified as a brain health coach. There was a young boy who was the sweetest kid in the world, a little teenager, fell off his bike, got a traumatic brain injury. He did very bad things. He did criminal things. He was getting some cutting edge help in the brain health, brain healing, and it was working. He was getting better, but he did have to go to jail for his actions. And in jail, they said, we don't do those kind of stuff here. And he ended up getting really worse and ended up killing himself. And so now, do I have compassion for him? And again, is it something I actually have, or that's just arising in me, or am I talking myself into it? And then we could play that game with all sorts of people and personas and different ways we show up in these biological spacesuits, right? And which ones is it where I actually could feel compassion versus where I'm either talking myself into it or being like, nope, I'm not gonna have compassion for that narcissist or that alcoholic or that axe murderer. um, so that's all fine. It's all a game of noticing, right? So today we're going to cover some of the things that is really integral to being a super conscious leader or a tiki leader. And the first thing I think everyone here already knows is the one truth, that love is the foundation. Like, this is the one truth. And if you equate that with an analogy to light, think about how even if there was the vastest darkness, even the tiniest little light, that darkness can't touch it. So this is the one truth, the one foundation. Nothing could touch it. And then this one is showing how if you go with that light analogy, we're all those beautiful lights. And in the stories you hear or heard, you know that people say, I knew this person's experience, or my guide, or whoever met me for my NDE. They didn't need to talk. I just knew. And it's showing a little bit of that overlap of consciousness and just knowing the experience of others. So from the formless comes the form. Oh my goodness. Like popcorn. And so again, from the one truth, we get form. And you see this more and more if you study quantum physics. You can look up quantum fields, you can look up what's going on with the Higgs field, and these little energies bop together and make a particle, and then the particle disappears back. And there's real physics to it. And sometimes the popcorns like bop into each other, right? And so now we have damage, we have dings, we have dents, we have pain. If you ever want to have some fun and teach this kind of thing, you could give a cue. I almost thought to do it here, but I didn't want to clean up the balls. To say, when I say, like popcorn, you all throw these balls at me. And inevitably, I'd probably get bonked in the eye, right? And so my personal belief now, or part of it anyway, is that just by being in the nature of being in form, that we do have this. We do have these collisions or dents or dings and earpieces falling off your head and such. And then we have taken on a frequency of something other than love. And I put a question mark there on purpose because I'm not saying it's something bad, right? So the one truth is love. Sometimes things take on a frequency other than love. And this brings us to the threefold mission of being a super conscious leader, which is, and it's okay if you can't see in the back because it's so easy, to amplify love, to call back to love that which has been unaligned or imprinted with something other than love, and to be a guardian for love. And if you like that, I'll put out a bag over here. I didn't want to put them in everybody's bag because I didn't know if everybody wanted them. You know, you all got this purple bag, but they're these little wooden, it's little reminder for when you see something that you don't like, you flip the coin. Maybe that's someone who's really all worked up in their biological spacesuit. Maybe they're hangry. Did you get hangry on this trip? Or meet a hangry person? I don't know. That person's got some stuff going on. Or even an entity. So I could say this here, right? And I don't know what's going on with that entity. Maybe they don't even know they're dead, right? That happens. People die and they don't even realize they're dead. Or something else. You know, sometimes they carry shame or guilt or fear of like being judged or what have you. And so the answer is really always love. So as we talk about being in the biological spacesuit, everything about the body and mind is always helpful or hopeful, right? So it's always has a helpful intent. Is it truly helpful in real life? There's going to be a video that comes on. I'm not sure if you'll hear the audio, but that's okay. You'll get the idea. So here we are, these spiritual giants projected into these biological spacesuits. And much like if we had like a little dog trying on walkie paws. Look how good he's doing. That's one of my dogs. He was just like, whatever, doing his business quite literally. My other dog was like, what is going on? And that's what we're doing when we decide to come on into these earth bodies, right? What's the condition of our biological spacesuit out of the box? And then as we live our life, well, what helpful tweaks are being made to it along the way? But we remember this for ourselves, and we remember this for the people we lead. We remember how stressed out they are, and how prevalent trauma is. And we start to see the suit stuff, right? And like one of the things I say is like sizing up the suit stuff and like what's going on for this person in front of me. And as she says, so I can't be silly, I'm about to show you something really, 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 really silly. The biological spacesuit, here you have all your super stressed out people you're leading, comes with a handy featherometer. And this featherometer behind the scenes is always scanning for threat or safety. And depending on what it comes up with, it throws you into one of three feather modes. I use this everywhere I work. A lot of times I use it, if you see off to the side there, as polyvagal theory. I use the same colors, and we use a ladder instead of the feathers. But I could easily pluck someone out of the audience and have you teach this to the group right now, right? What is it like to be in green feather mode versus yellow versus red? And also if everybody's so stressed out and they're in this yellow feather mode, like we know they are, because 83% of our workers are chronically stressed. Notice they're not getting much oxygen to their smarty pants brain over there. So we really have this limited range of emotional, like we're really going to fight or flee. You know this, the mobilized fight or fight, sympathetic. But it's a full body helpful response where we're shutting down our digestive system, immune system, reproductive system, because this is meant for just quick, let's survive. And we don't need any of that stuff when we just need to survive for a really quick little second. So getting stuck in this mode is super unhealthy across all your body systems and your brain. I have E-motion there because this is the life-saving mode, and these forms of negativity, which again aren't bad, are programmed with an action tendency, right? So fear, I'm going to fight or flee. Disgust, I'm going to throw up. That is kind of it's a tendency. You're not saying it's definitely going to happen, but there's a tendency to action for these. Then we could go, and when we consider trauma and the prevalence of it, you likely have people too who might get stuck in the red, which is more of this shutdown, hopelessness, numbness, despair, dissociation even as well. So one of our first things is trying to make sure we could help do our best within our scope of practice too, to help people get to green, as their baseline. You notice the two V's down in the bottom there, VV, ventral vagal. This is the vagus nerve. If you've ever seen everyone stimulate the vagus, they're talking ventral vagus. Notice that we have our smarty pants brain on, up and running in all our systems. We have access to so many forms of positivity. And Dr. Stephen Rudin coined this E-notion. And I love that because instead of having these rigid responses for survival, every possibility is possible, right? This is for long-term survival. We're safe, we're connected, soar and explore, stay and play, rest and digest. It's all kind of rhymes for you. What's beyond that mountain? What can we build? What can we create, right? So If we're meeting our team where they're at, they're likely in that ever stress mode. We want to try to help get them to green. And beyond that, since we're super conscious leaders, we want to try to get them to super green, which helps them to connect to those self-transcendent emotions where it's not just about me, it's about something bigger than me. And these are beautiful things. If you've ever had the experience where you just saw a rainbow or a double rainbow and it was just pure oneness, right? It just, everything else just comes on out and you having that self-transcendent emotion. That's awe. And here's some more self-transcendent emotions that we could tap into for ourselves and for others. Of course, getting out into nature and getting experiences where we could activate awe is perfect when we can. Other self-transcendent emotions. Here's my babies. See, Bella likes her vest. She didn't like her walkie paws, so I didn't want to embarrass her with putting footage up. But love and compassion and connection. So we want to think about those beautiful self-transcendent emotions. And so as we're getting people and moving them along this map, you're trying to get them out of that survival mode, even teaching them one way or another about green, yellow, red, polyvagal theory, get silly, their brains are turned off anyway. Play is always the way. And the other thing is with the featherometer, that if I'm sizing someone up and being like, oh, he's in yellow feather mode, what's happening inside my body? Like, that's silly. That's ridiculous. So I'm staying in the physiology of safety just for the fact that that's a silly thing to think. So here we show up. What's the composition of the team that I'm leading? Another fascinating, awesome feature of the biological spacesuit is called co-regulation. Behind the scenes, if I'm in that green state, my system is giving off the cues of safety and connection and co-regulating those around me to green. So even if you could get yourself, be it through your meditation practice, whatever you like to do, into that green state and just go walk around town, you're a superhero. You know, just being in green is amazing to those around you. And that's yet another example of like helping to call things back to love. So trying to help our team get to green, part of that could be teaching them about green, try to get them to green in moments when maybe you have to resolve a conflict, try to help them get to green as their home base. Help them make a list of like, what gets me to green, right? So there's lots of fun ideas. And then the more and more we are in green, the more and more we are connected to our beautiful spirit. We also have access to blended states in the state of safety. One is when we take that safe green and mix it with a little bit of mobilization. So at work, we want to get people into flow states. You might hear this, right? Get into that flow state or get into the peak performance. And then on the other side, where we have safe and immobilization, here's where I think my non-dual meditation took me to my awesome quantum change experience, where it's that safety of green mixed with the immobilization of red. So if you can't get out into nature, we found like even something like letting people play with those viewfinders and you just to put them up and like, oh, you know, they just change right away. We found that looking at beaches and outer space were the ones that brought on the awe experience. Of course, now there's also VR, and that's a whole other realm of being able to let people get into some of those self-transcendent emotional states. Another tool that's called polyvagal theory. So I said, I'm going to be silly. I called it the featherometer. It's called polyvagal theory. It's fantastic. Dr. Stephen Porges came with it. Deb Dana, LCSW, has tons of books. You could get a flip chart with dry erase. You could get playing cards, and people love this. Where I work, someone said we're asking a team to do something, and it's like, my whole team's in yellow. Could you call us in 2 weeks? And we talk about it in terms of greeting our customers, greeting each other as a team. So do it silly, do it not silly, don't do it at all. But I love that tool. I use it everywhere, whether I'm doing doing a training for one of those professional certifications, or if I'm doing something as a learning and development manager. The other tool I love, how many people heard of IFS, Internal Family Systems? Right, I love this, and so here I am today, and I'm giving the spiritual language because I'm at IANDS. At work, there's probably considerations. I'm probably not going to march into work and say, "You're a spiritual giant." Maybe you will, but yes, but IFS calls what I equate with spirit self, right? And this has been around since the 1980s. It's science-backed, it's evidence-backed, and it acknowledges that we're not just one personality, that we have multiples. Everyone does. And these are my best AI prompt attempts at showing what it might look like to have parts. Every time I describe parts, I always talk about food because that's what my parts argue about. But parts are always helpful, or at least they have helpful intent. There's a book Dr. Richard Schwartz wrote. He's the one who founded IFS, and he used the language of parts because he noticed that's what all his patients were saying, parts, parts, parts. IFS is another thing that you could use in therapy, or you could use as a coach, right? So there are no bad parts. All parts have good intentions. I thought this was a fun one because you can see they're pulling on the brake. No, it's too scary. Let's do it, right? So sometimes parts are polarized. Sometimes parts are in cahoots with each other. They always have helpful intent. Is it actually helpful in reality? So even parts that are alcoholic parts or suicidal parts, believe it or not, have helpful intent for the system, not actually helpful to most people's lives, right? So I'm glad there's no audio because this one was a little bit high pitched, but you can have people play around, ask people, you give them some finger puppets and they show you what's going on with their parts. So this one was on shopping for an expensive dress. You got the fearful little part there. So people take to this, we notice it. And then the beauty of it is you can have internal harmony. You can have a family that has this beautiful harmony and is led by the part that's not a part, which is self. So here's the little finger play. People have fun. And so with the goal, one of the goals of IFS is to have our parts led by self. And if our part took on a burden or a role, it did that to be helpful to the system. So if we had a very nice part, an exuberant childlike part, and then there was some kind of trauma or incident, and this part is wounded, not only is it wounded, but the rest of the system wants to tuck it away and be like, let's put that pain away, let's exile you. And then other parts come on and take on other roles and other burdens. And we have one part on the one side who's like, well, if I do these things, that part won't come out. That pain won't come up if we do these things. And that's a very proactive protection. And then we have the reactive protection of if that part's trying to come out. So like I said, I have made the PDF, or I will make the PDF available where you could see, I didn't intend to read any of this, but I wanted to put it in case you're interested, because it's a beautiful thing. You could bring it to work. It's made such a big difference in my life, even if I didn't follow the official steps you have to do. Go for it. You could even ask ChatGPT for the steps, like, or find a YouTube meditation or something. But just even understanding that there's this truly a whole cast of characters in there. So I recommend checking out anything IFS. I really do think it could really save and change the world. I was laughing yesterday because I was thinking about the difference between compassion and empathy. And then I sat down at Starbucks and I saw this. And so I wrote to her and I was like, I'm going to put this in my slides. So if you like IFS, this is an account. It's the_ordinary_sacred. And she's always sharing about IFS. And they're all these good little nuggets like micro learning And she was saying here, empathy is to feel with others, compassion is to feel for others, willing to act on their behalf. Parts feel empathy, self feels compassion. And I thought that was really interesting. And I always ask that question too of, is that compassion that's just there, or am I talking myself into it? So again, we could call our parts back to love. As super conscious leaders, we could size up like what parts are popping up for this person, or what parts are popping up for me. So I wouldn't introduce that to anyone until we get to still they're safe, like number 2. And there's lots of fun and games, and oopsie, okay. There's lots of fun and games you could do if you like to make it playful and interactive. And now I'll tell you what I noticed when I had the quantum change experience. There's something in IFS called a spontaneous unburdening, which the parts just drop their baggage. And I was listening to Dr. Wayne Dyer give advice of, when you have a choice, and you always do, to be kind or to be right, choose kind. Now, I was from New York, and I wasn't kind to the tune of gestures out my car window probably half a dozen times before I got to work. And one of your thoughts was always like, what's this idiot doing, right? I don't know if that's the East Coast thing, a New York thing, or just my family thing, but those parts were popping up in there with all that kind of stuff. And then I had that part who wanted to remind me of Dr. Wayne's advice. But after I had the quantum change experience, I noticed like I was just kind. Like there was no more inner, hey, let's be nice. So that's explained in the IFS sense. It's called the spontaneous unburdening. I have a BS in biochemistry, and I always love following everything. Like I love biology, but I did biochemistry because I wanted to get into it. So then I learned about what's going on at the neuronal level, which is basically uninstalling receptors in the cell membrane. And these receptors are like also channels that let the information flow through. So when we have a threat-based encoding or a trauma encoding or stress-induced encoding, there's really fast gamma waves sweeping through the brain. And the amygdala is like, we better remember this. This is fast learning. Let's install this receptor in the membrane and super glue it in there for the future. And not only does it remember the threatening content, your amygdala is like on it. Again, helpful/helpful. We're going to remember what it smells like. We're going to remember what the weather's like. We're going to remember what color hair, the t-shirt, all these things. So if you ever get triggered and just like, blonde hair shouldn't freak me out, there could be an encoding in there that's a warning, right? And so this is what happens then when we want to take away those trauma encodings, and why I'm so excited about havening touch is we have special protocols for it. But while we're doing it, you're basically getting those delta waves going that I was telling you about earlier, and then it uninstalls. If you like science, endocytosis. If you don't like science, hungry hippos. We're eating up those submarines. And so that's what's happening with those delta waves. And that's what made me think it was like havening everything everywhere all at once, like uninstalling all that stuff all at once. And I was reading an article on these pivotal experiences, quantum change experiences, like research article. And it was like, oh, trauma primes people for this quantum change experience. It's like, yeah, because there's more to erase. There's some more to call back to love. Then in a study on near-death, not near-death, but time-of-death experiences, they talked about paradoxical gamma followed by delta. And again, that's the pattern we see for the trauma and the havening, right? And so there could be something in play there for the near-death level of how does this all get erased, right? So I just find that super fascinating. So with havening techniques, I did put online for everybody because I knew we weren't going to have time to try it, and it is very exciting. I'm not a therapist, so I always deal with derailers, not disorders, unless a doctor or a therapist sends someone my way. So it's meant to deal with traumas, but it's also meant to help with wellness. But I added in a dream coaching audio. I'll give you the link to it. if you've ever heard of how Edison would fall asleep holding ball bearings and let them fall because he wanted to go from beta to theta and get inspired. Inspired means in spirit. And wake himself up with this great new inspiration. Well, so the dream coaching lets you use imagination and havening. Havening gives you delta. Imagination gives you theta. And so you could get inspired without needing to fall asleep and scare the pants off yourself a few moments later. I've also, like I said, been exploring this beyond the veil communication with havening. So if you want to try it, I'll open up a Zoom where we could set up time. And I've had, like I said, 87.5 success rate with some form of connection. So not necessarily the person that person wanted to connect with, but something has happened. And so I do want to explore this more. And it is as simple as gentle touch. So these are the motions. I'll show it to you on the Zoom. You could also go to my website and see these kinds of videos for beyond the veil communication reasons, etc. So I highly recommend it. We all have hands, and once you know a good protocol, you're good to go. You could use it forever for free on yourself. So I'm going to just jump forward because I know we did cover all these things. Like we covered the featherometer, we've covered the different states. This is just a different way of looking at it. We covered understanding how narrowed in people are, and the brain's getting less and less oxygen, right? So we saw all of this with the featherometer, and we have compassion for people. We understand. You think you criticize people, why don't they just want to do that? They literally don't see the possibilities. They don't see the up. Okay. Then we talked about the importance of IFS and self, and then we talked about getting to it in the neurons. And so as we have just a minute left, maybe you can notice super quickly then if there's any change in any of these characters and real people that I told you about. And a reminder too that I have this coin for you if you want it. And on my site, which is betterandbetterer.com, I would love to interview anyone who wants to come on the podcast. You don't have to be like any book or even an experience, whatever. I love talking about this stuff. As you see, I've talked to Betty and Vinny, and I made a little carousel of like ideas, and it just clicks through to like blog posts of like what you might want to use with people, free PDFs all over the site, etc. My dad was always my biggest fan, so I have different books online and different workshop books. And what was I going to say? I guess that's good. And then I wanted to give you my real contact information, and don't be shy. Even if you text me right now, hey, I just saw you at IANDS, because we do need to connect with each other. We do need to share ideas. My kids said, Mom, what are you going to talk about? I said, what am I not going to talk about? So if anything sounded like interesting and you want to get more into it, or you want some kind of resource or whatever, just hit me up. I love this stuff. I love sharing it. And it really does help do what we want, right? To amplify love, call back to love that which is unaligned, and be that guardian for love as well. Thank you.
What is a practical thing that one of us in an office environment or in a work environment can do to engage when we see somebody in those like color zones? Because this sounds like it's coming from a standpoint of having a position of being able to access people. Mm-hmm. What if we're just regular people in the office? Yeah. Or the boss who in a day-to-day kind of thing?
Yeah. So the first thing I'll say is the more you could stay in that ventral vagal green, you'll be surprised the calming effect you have even when people are losing it. But trying to get them outside into nature, get them away from if there's a lot going on, because you really want to give off these cues of safety and connection. Deb Dana, LCSW, she's a real therapist. She's the real deal in polyvagal, the expert pioneer. She talks about giving them choices, because that helps, that your brain loves choices versus feeling like you have to do something a certain way. Give them context. So like instead of telling them what they need to do, like give them the information around it because we hate uncertainty, and give them the connection. So she calls those 3 C's. But anything you could do to, there's so many ways to help people get to that green. It's a great question. Yeah.
The NDEers love it when you say go out in nature. Okay, questions, anyone?
It sounds like you work with groups of people with this material, and I wonder, you know, what are, say you're bringing it to meetings, like there's a regular schedule of meetings. Can you make recommendations about how to bring these tools in to like maintain the health of the body of the.
Yeah. I would say, so I never say I'm a super conscious leader. Like this is the only place I'm going to say it. And honestly, if I didn't get selected to speak here, I would have never said it again. I'm going more with that TIKI leadership, trauma informed, quantum informed. But I plug into servant leadership and host leadership. If you haven't heard this one, it's like you're a party host. What kind of leadership is that? I'm the party host and these are my guests. But I would definitely do polyvagal theory one way or another because people love it. They pick it up. They appreciate that you're trying to help get them out of that ever stressed mode. And play is really the way. Play, getting them out there, humor. Karen Buxton has a TED talk on how humor saved the world. So like sharing these little things with them. And that's what I'm gathering. Like I'm making a PDF. So if you do come to that site, it's not so much right now, but I'm going to add more. And I have I think I link over to a list where I just have like a random list of stuff. But in the beginning of a meeting, like what's a good joke? What's the funniest thing that happened this week? Tell us a pun or something like make us groan with that. But you could factor it in, or any of these things, even if you like havening. So if you're not a certified practitioner, you shouldn't be teaching someone havening or havening them, but you could certainly pull up a certified practitioner's 2-minute video for CPR for the amygdala. Dr. Kate has CPR for the amygdala. So when you're stressed out, hey, let's do this, and let's de-stress and do this havening. So if we were going to be here figuring out the Zoom, I was going to just be like, hey, let's haven. I'll show you something before that Zoom starts. So there's just so many things, and I have ideas. I'm sure other people have great ideas, but it has to be that way of life, like of how you show up for sure. Yeah.
Yeah, I appreciate this so much because it's validating some of our practices. Since we're online all the time, we ask people to be prepared to come on camera for the first 5 minutes and share something silly that happened to them that day, or something very light that doesn't have anything to do with accomplishments or their work or productivity. And we've learned so much about people, and then they get along better in the meetings from that. And everything you've said validates that experience. So I really, really appreciate that.
The big thing in corporate now is knowledge management, and we have explicit knowledge and tacit knowledge, and they always want to figure out how to share the tacit knowledge because that's the knowledge stuck in people's heads. And the better bonds you make with people, it pays off so many dividends because now people feel safe. Not only that, they feel bonded, especially now with the Zoom world. It's like we have task-based trust, but we don't have that interpersonal trust. So it might seem like frivolous, like why are we doing the play? What's it called? The Association of Applied and Therapeutic Humor. Tons of research if you ever need like to make that case, right? Like I'm just going to work places where they're like, but sometimes you have to make the case.